Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on our podcast. His name is Andy, and he is with the Vote Third Party Challenge. So welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to helping you with whatever I can.
Excellent. Our audience will love to hear what you have to say. So kindly give us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Okay. Gosh. Well, I live in Canada now. I grew up in the U.S., New Mexico. I went to school in Boston, actually in Cambridge at MIT, and I have a degree in marketing from there. And have just been involved in many businesses. I grew up in politics. My family was involved in politics. I think we would consider them Democrats, but I don't go by that myself. But that's the way I grew up. But that was many years ago. So there's been a lot of changes, of course, in politics over those 50 years. So. That's also skewed as well. So that's kind of my background.
Sure. So can you tell our audience what your Vote Third Party Challenge is all about?
Okay, so I came up with a theory because anybody that's wanted to vote for third parties always hears this idea, a vote for this third party is really a vote for this guy,
yes.
this Democrat or this Republican. And by the way, the Democrats and the Republicans both say a vote for the third party is a vote for the other party.
Yeah.
They both say the same thing. So how could it be both a vote for the Democrats and the Republicans if I say voted Libertarian or someone voted Libertarian? That just doesn't make sense. So first of all, that's a self-serving statement. They, of course, want the person to vote for their party. They don't want them to vote for the third party. They're motivated by that. But I came up with a theory and goes like this. We know about red states and blue states.
Yeah.
Okay. And we also know about voter apathy. So there's two issues that I want to address here. If someone lives in a state, for example, that is, say, a solid blue state, which would be Democrat, and the Democrats going to win by 10% or 20%, and they're just going to win, then if they are a Republican, then voting for a third party does not affect the outcome at all. Zero effect. In fact, it registers that they did not like either candidate. They, in fact, wanted a third party. And so really, people that would argue their vote is wasted anyway because they know they're going to lose. And as soon as you know you're going to lose, your vote is basically wasted. Yep. So they might as well vote for something they believe in rather than the lesser of two evils, if you follow that thinking. Now, secondarily, there's voter apathy. So I'm talking about voters. They're not going to go to the polls. They're not going to go and vote because they don't like one of these two candidates.
Yep.
So they just don't go. Well, if they go down and vote a third party, their vote does not affect either one of those. They weren't going to go anyway.
Exactly.
So that has net zero effect on the outcome of the Democrat-Republicans, by the way. The apathetic voter, and then again, the voters whose votes are already lost. So I'm just encouraging people to go ahead and take that step and say we want something different. And I don't really care what that is. I mean, I'm not in support of any particular third party. I really just want to know, and I'm in marketing, and I said that, I want to know what they want, what they really want.
Yes.
And the only way to get to that is to say, hey, you can choose all these other choices.
Yes. I like what you're saying. When I was in college, I had a professor who refuted that idea that you're stealing votes by voting for an alternative party versus one of the two parties. And that was during one of the biggest elections that caused a conflict between the alternative parties and the major parties. That was the 2000 election. So one of the arguments he presented was, like what you're saying is, you're assuming that all the people that would vote would be the same during whatever election, but the alternative party people might be bringing in people that wouldn't have voted anyways. So they're not stealing anybody's vote in that sense. These people are going to wouldn't vote for the Democrats or Republicans anyways. They only vote because the alternative party people come in. So you're right that the apathetic voters are a big block that needs to be consideration. Also, people, they may be apathetic for various reasons. Maybe some of them don't care about politics in general, yet some of them may be apathetic because they don't like the choices, like you're saying. So, yes, so they're not stealing anything away from the two parties.
Well, right, and really that's our goal, really, isn't it, to get more people voting, to get more people's opinions expressed, and to get the system working for everyone.
Sure. So since you're in Canada, can you briefly compare and contrast the two electoral systems?
Well, okay, so there's no president in Canada, although we have a prime minister, but the head of state is really the governor general, which is a representative of the king. But that's largely a ceremonial job, but they do have powers. And so you hear a lot about the prime minister, and they're really a member of parliament, so they're in there. It'd be like, the Speaker of the House or whatever would actually be in charge of the government if that was the case in the U.S. So in the U.S. there's the Congress, and that's the Senate and the House, and then of course they're elected, and then the president is elected. Then there's the courts. I'm not talking about them because they're generally not elected, but so those are our elected officials, and that's kind of. By the way, if you want me to think about it and tell you, I really think the job of president should be a very boring job, like just keeping things running. The roads are running, the police, the schools, the military, everybody's getting their Social Security check, the Medicare, they're running all these systems that Congress has voted on. And their job should really be very boring, but it should get it done. And for everybody. And then the Congress is supposed to be the ones that are making the rules. And unfortunately, some rules, and you find that in Canada too, that gets kicked over to the courts, and there's a court decision, and then eventually some of those court decisions fail because it wasn't based on law. There was never a law enacted. It was a decision by the court, which the courts don't make laws, as we know. They're not supposed to anyway. And so that's the failure of the whole system in general, is we've depended too much on the courts to make laws, which are not really laws. And then the elected officials, whether it be in Parliament or in Congress, refuse to clarify what the real law should be, which is that's their job to do. And we need to get them doing their job. And if they're not doing their job, and they're Democrats and Republicans in the U.S., and that's who it's been, by the way, and so we need to get someone else. I mean, that's why I said a third party, because they're not doing it. They can't, and the big issues that year after year for 50 years we heard the same issues. They can't solve it, apparently.
Yep. So how about for the party system in Canada? How many active parties are contending for power in the Canadian system?
So probably in the Canadian government, I think there's at least 4 parties that have members of Parliament. There might be 5. So the top 2 are the Liberals and the Conservatives, and then there's the New Democratic Party, which is a little bit socialist leaning. There's the Green Party, which has maybe a C or 2, and of course that's kind of an eco party. And then there's the Parti Québécois, which deals with more Quebec type issues in Canada, because there's kind of the cultural and language thing going on here.
Sure.
But in the U.S., even in the Democratic Party back in the 70s, 60s, 50s, earlier, they used to have in the Democratic Party what they called like the Dixiecrats. And they were really the conservative wing of the Democratic Party, and they were primarily Southern Democrats.
Yep.
Right? So the Democratic Party hasn't always all been so super liberal, by the way.
Exactly, yep.
And so I think that's an important distinction, and that has kind of changed, and that part of the party has faded, and it's been ceded over to a more liberal, in the South at least, or other parts, ceded over to a more liberal agenda, and so that balance has disappeared. And by the way, I grew up in New Mexico, and I said I've been in Massachusetts. And by the way, I will say that the New Mexico Democrats are more conservative than the Massachusetts Republicans.
Interesting.
So that's a different dichotomy, right? Like that.
Oh, yeah.
Is the way it is. So we think of this ubiquitous party, but that is not really the case. And I would say, and so I would go to say, so that is really kind of like, are we getting apples for apples everywhere or not? And we're not. And so really each local party, but then when they get on the national level and they go to Washington or they go to Ottawa, they kind of seem to forget us back here at home, the people that send them there, and, they start talking in this kind of double talk speech that those of us waiting back home go, okay, what is this guy talking about?
Yeah.
And I think there's the disconnect, and there's too much money and influence, and then why are they already running for re-election when they get in the door? I always have that question. And can't they just get there and say, I had these two issues and I got them done and I don't need to be reelected because I got my stuff done or something. I mean, that ultimately might be the goal, but they're convinced they need to get reelected. And really it's an ongoing campaign instead of a governance.
Yeah.
And really we need good governance, not campaign promises. Really, that's. I'm sorry. That's just where that's my disgruntlement with the system.
Oh, sure. We understand that. A lot of people here echo your sentiment, so it's something we understand. Here's a question for you. So you were talking about the Canadian system has 4 or 5 active parties contending for government, which is a lot better than ours because we have 2. So do you think 4 or 5 is the optimal number, or do you think there should be more parties involved in government? So is there some point where there's too many parties, or do you think the more the merrier?
Well, I don't know what the number is. 2 is not enough.
Yep.
3 is a good start. I would say 4, is probably a minimum of representation in Congress or somewhere like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because really we need to hear, by the way, who's going to bring that third alternative viewpoint or fourth alternative viewpoint to the fore? And usually one of those might be the compromise position.
Yes.
So who's going to bring that forward if we don't have them because they don't allow their own members to bring forward progressive ideas if they don't fit their agenda?
Yep.
So I really don't see how it could hurt to have a third or fourth opinion in the room, or an alternative. I certainly don't think, I mean, if they don't have good ideas, they won't be around very long. If they don't have good, support, they won't be around. So I just say, everyone, look for a third candidate in every office in the land. Look for a fourth candidate.
Yeah.
Do your research. And give someone else maybe a chance to solve some of the problems that have lingered for so long. I really, it sounds oversimplistic, but and I view it like, think about as a vector graph our vote.
Okay.
And the more votes that go for someone, the more power they have in the vector system. Well, if we're just choosing the lesser of two evils, we're giving our vector support to somebody.
Yeah.
We're ceding our power as a voter and saying, I support that.
Mm-hmm.
And our power is going to them, and they're channeling it on up. And I want everyone to know that that's what they're doing. And so if they're voting for someone kind of half-heartedly, but they like somebody else, they're giving their power to that.
Yep, true.
So I'm going to say, give your power to something that you believe in. And that's as simple as I can say. And it's not anyone else's vote. And it doesn't matter about anyone else's math. And it doesn't matter about anyone else's candidate or agenda. If we don't believe in our vote, then we give it our power to someone else half-heartedly, then we're giving them that. But it's one full vote, by the way. It's not a half-hearted vote. It's a full vote. And that is like really the bottom line. If we don't start standing up and saying, this idea over here is better, this person's probably better, regardless if 90% are going to vote for that guy and only 10% for this guy, I still think he's better. Is my voice worth hearing? Is my voice vote worth using for my own belief? I don't know. It doesn't matter anyone else's math.
Good point. Good way of articulating it. One thing people like to say about alternative parties is that they bring forth new ideas that the other two parties aren't considering, or possibly, similarly, they bring different twists on the same ideas they're talking about. When I went up to Canada, it was a long time ago, but I believe it's still the same scenario there. When I went up to Canada, I saw billboards you would never see in the United States. In Canada, in the United States, there are a lot of similarities. We're not talking about the United States versus North Korea. Our countries are very similar in many ways. I saw billboards about going to Cuba on vacation. Now that's changed some, yet that's one thing all alternative parties, whether they're green or libertarian, they oppose that sanctions on Cuba because they don't see Cuba as something to oppose. So do you see the reason is it because of the unique tension between the Cubans and the Americans with the Bay of Pigs and all that stuff, or do you think it's the different political climate that caused that?
Yeah, I think you're right on that. The parties, and start with the Democrats, because under Kennedy was when some of that stuff was put in place, and he's somewhat of a martyr, of course, and that's very difficult to deal with. So that's part of their policy since that moment, and it's hard to get rid of it. And alternatively, you mentioned the Bay of Pigs and the whole commie scare and the Republicans being a little hawkish. That's been their stance. That's why they're just entrenched in those positions. And by the way, a lot of these guys and gals, men and women that serve in Congress, gosh, some of them are long in the tooth.
Some of them are what?
long in the tooth. They're getting old. They're very old.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Their worldview is very old, and this is the leadership. And really, a lot of the new, young, and upcoming people, greenhorns, some of them, and they have, and by the way, they're also extremists in position now because that's who we elect. So if you want to think the centrists are these old people that have been there a long time and kind of know how the system works and comfortable with it, but their worldview is very old.
Okay.
So if we're going to get in new people, new blood whose worldview is centrist, moderates, then we have to look to the third parties too, because the party system is not providing us with centrist, moderate ideas that are going to take us forward. And I don't care. I don't care if people say, oh, well, I'm on this way left or way right of the agenda. I'm like, well, but the center is where most of us are. I mean, in reality, that's statistics and mathematics and everything else. So if they really want to do the math, then the guy they picked is way too far out to really address the needs of the greatest percentage of the population. And we need new blood, and we need new ideas, and we need new people in there that are going to do that and not be extremists. Because extremism is not going to be a long-term solution to anything, really.
Sure, certainly not. So I do see in Canada some of your people are in long time too. Do you have term limits for any offices in Canada?
Oh, you know what? We don't. Unfortunately, I was just discussing, even our prime minister has been there over 10 years, and I was just discussing that we should probably, it'd be nice to have, like the U.S. has, a term limit on the head of state.
Yeah.
But we don't know. We don't have that.
Okay. All right. So that's interesting. It's interesting to hear about the two systems and your views on alternative parties, and we love to hear what you're saying. So that's awesome. So how can our audience support you in your efforts?
I think people talk about it and just understand. I mean, we have a Facebook page, and I've supported that for like 16 years. It's been going every campaign for many years. It's not my first year coming with this idea. And I've heard the same arguments over and over. It's the math argument. That's BS. And then I say, well, what if all the apathetic voters just go and vote for a third party? Yeah. What if everybody that says, I don't want one of these two, just goes and votes for someone else? I don't know who it is. And I'm not campaigning for anyone, by the way. See, that's the thing.
No one in particular.
I want them to vote their conscience. I want them to find their fit. And when those parties start getting 5 or 10% of the vote, then they might get 15, and people will start paying attention. And they will also get better candidates, and they'll get more candidates because their candidate pool will be bigger, and their support pool will be bigger, and they'll start winning a few places, and maybe win a presidency or something. Because at the end of the day, it wouldn't hurt to have a third party presidency, even if you have, the major parties in Congress, because someone has to play referee with those guys too. Like someone unbiased needs to be there and go, hey, fell down. This isn't right. And we really don't get that. It's always some sort of biased opinion. Unfortunately, that's the way I feel. And I think it's unfortunate that even the respect for the job of president has declined. And that used to be, that used to be respected by everyone. It didn't matter. So there's some work to do on that, gaining the respect for the office back. and
yeah,
and that saddens me that it saddens me that there's such disrespect. To be honest with you.
sure. Yeah, let's hope that we can restore the dignity of that position. It's a very prominent role in the United States, of course, and also worldwide. So you're right. It should have more respect behind it, and let's hope we can restore that.
And that's the goal. Everybody has to vote for their conscience, and that's the way we're going to get to the right people.
All right, Andy, we thank you for coming on the podcast today and sharing your views. We love to hear what you've been saying, so thank you.
Thank you so much. And you know what? Keep up the good work. Encourage people to vote and vote their conscience and vote for the best world that we can make and together. So anyway, thank you for that.
Sure thing. That's our mission here. So we wish you all the best in everything you do, your page, and everything else you do in life.
Cheers. You have a great day.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.